In years past, the Maryland governor's race traditionally featured two well-known politicians that came up through the party ranks. Think Marvin Mandel, Don Schaefer, and even Bob Ehrlich, excuse me. But this year's election offers something else. On the Democratic side, Wes Moore's background in finance and nonprofits couldn't be farther from the old school politics. On the Republican side, that candidate, Dan Cox, filed articles of impeachment against the sitting governor, not against a Democrat, but against Larry Hogan, who's another Republican. So, Mike, it may be too soon to identify any trends emanating from these results, but it seems that the electorate on both sides are dissatisfied with the status quo. They're in search of a new shiny object to believe in. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it is, at least on the Democratic side. When I looked at kind of the primary candidates this year, and they were vast, and they were all names that people had known and many people had voted for. You had people like Francho and Gansler, who had both run statewide previously. I think people were interested in looking at somebody who wasn't the same person they'd always voted for, and recognize that there is change out there, and how do we find somebody who brings a little different perspective to the table to be able to take us in a different direction.
So I want to know about Wes Moore, but is there a generational shift here now? I mean, obviously, Peter Francho was well known. He's a long time serving politician. Is there a generational shift now to younger and hopefully somewhat better?
Well, I think there is. It's interesting, if you look at the Democratic primary, I mean, typically our Democratic primary voter is a more traditional, older Democratic voter. And so I think that you still have that, but I think that Wes presented a really compelling reason to look someplace different. I think he just brings a lot of different experiences and hasn't always been hasn't ever been in elected office. And I think people were genuinely excited by that.
So Mark, before we get into the particulars about candidate Cox, I mean, are Republican voters doing the same? Is there a generational shift here? Or what's the dynamics in your party?
It could be a generational shift, but I think you're right on the money that in both parties, there was a hunger for a departure from the sort of traditional approach, and in both parties chose sort of non-establishment, if you will, party establishment candidates to go forward. And I think it reflects something in the electorate that's looking for change.
Well, so what do we know about Dan Cox?
Dan Cox, I'm sorry. Yes, I mean, he's very much the representative of sort of the red state Maryland. That chafed under Larry Hogan and thought that they could have their views represented that much more forcefully. And it really was a vote against the Hogan years, if you will, within the primary. I guess it's disappointing for those who supported Hogan, and we'll obviously see how it turns out in November.
Well, on every level, there seems to be sharp contrasts in the view of whether it's education, healthcare, environment, crime, gun control. There is a wide difference on how to address these issues. And even in the parties, there seem to be some, although I think the Democrats are more unified on this issue. On these issues.
That's nice for a change. We like that.
Really? So, I just want to know realistically, Mark, Maryland's a blue state, and the voters have to be angry, or the candidates have to be awful for a Republican to win. Can Cox pull off a surprise here?
Well, he faces a challenge. We talked about the issue of people looking for change. And obviously that's the case that he's going to be making, is that Wes Moore, as the teacher union endorsed candidate, really isn't that change, isn't that agent of change, and will simply reflect more of the same. And that's the case he needs to make to the voter, is that he presents a contrast between a more traditional way of approaching education and the views that he wants to see enacted.
So, Mike, I've always believed local issues are more important than national issues in these types of races. And we've seen this uptick in crime. We've seen a lot of stories about, tremendous drug use and going on in especially in Baltimore. Sorry, never get interrupted by a cell phone before. Anyway, in any event, are the local issues going to dominate, and will there see some voter unrest as a result thereof?
I don't know that they'll dominate. I mean, I think certainly the challenges that Baltimore continues to face continue to be something that every statewide candidate has to wrestle with and has to figure out how to address. I think, interestingly, West did well in Baltimore, did really well in Prince George's County, and I think, he did solidly well in Montgomery County. And so I think that collectively people are looking at the experiences that he brings. And interestingly, and I got to say I'm a little surprised at this, but very pleased. I think he represented probably one of the more moderate perspectives of those folks running in the Democratic primary. And so I think where Larry Hogan has been very effective at being able to reach across the aisle and identify those moderate Democrats and show that he could chart a more centrist path, I think that West presents a very similar approach to this year's race. I think he certainly has his progressive bona fides and has come from working in a philanthropic background at the Robin Hood Foundation and is focused on poverty issues. But by the same token, he's also a military veteran, and he has, I think, interesting credentials from that perspective as well. And I think while he has received some of the more traditional Democratic endorsements, I also think he's done a really nice job of kind of indicating that we're in this for everybody.
Well, you're going to have the last word here. And when we come back from this short break, we're going to take a look at the county executive race. And I will make a note that since my wife called to bring home the milk, I'll make sure that I put a note down on my calendar.
You said it's about the local issues. It really is.
It is always. I'm just glad that with the Biden inflation that I can afford some milk, Mike. Stay tuned.